This is the image we're all sold. The rugged pioneer, a tin pan in his hands, striking it rich in the California dirt. But really, it's the ultimate American myth. In 1848, the discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill sparked the largest mass migration in American history. Over 300,000 people dropped everything to travel to California. They were promised a paradise where the rivers literally ran with gold, but in reality, well, the overwhelming majority of these people went home deeply in debt, diseased, or even worse, dead. Roughly $2 billion worth of precious metals was pulled from the earth. So, if the guys doing the digging were starving, then where did actually all the money go? Now, the answer reveals a fundamental rule of wealth that still dictates our economy today, and it's a business lesson known across the world. The people who made the real money didn't mine for gold. They mined the miners. And the mastermind who engineered the entire rush, a man who became California's first millionaire, did it with a scheme so brilliant it's still taught in business schools today. But to understand his play, we have to first look at the terrifying economics of just getting to California. You have to remember, in 1849, there was no transcontinental railroad. If you lived on the East Coast, you had three terrible options to get to San Francisco. Option 1, walk 2,000 miles across the Plains Mountains, risking cholera, starvation, and freezing to death. Option 2 is taking about 18,000 miles around the violent stories of Cape Horn at the bottom of South America, a miserable 6-month journey. And option 3 is sailing to Panama, hiking through a malaria-infested jungle, and praying that you're catching another boat on the Pacific side. So by the time a prospector actually arrived in California, they had usually spent their life savings just to survive the trip alone. They were heavily victimized by the sunk cost fallacy, meaning they had risked too much to turn back, and now they're completely desperate. And in economics, this desperation is highly profitable. San Francisco wasn't ready for the 300,000 people coming into their town. It was a sleepy village of about 1,000 residents. But suddenly, it became this booming, chaotic metropolis. But it had absolutely zero infrastructure. It had no farms for food, no factories, no supply chain. So every single item needed to be imported for these people to survive. Now, because the demand was infinite with this huge population growth and the supply was virtually zero, inflation went completely insane. So, if we're translating these 1849 prices into today's money, 2026, a single egg is costing about $25. And a basic pair of work boots, well, that's going to run you over $2,500. But luckily for the miners, they were actually finding gold. And on a good day, a prospector might pull $20 worth in 1849 prices of gold from the river, which was an astronomical wage at the time when an East Coast laborer made just about $1 a day. Now, the only problem here is that even though they're pulling up this $20 worth in gold, it's costing them over $20 a day just to buy enough food to not starve to death, on top of all the resources and materials they need to buy. The wealth was instantly transferring from the hands of the laborer straight into the pockets of the merchants, which now brings us to the man who orchestrated the greatest monopoly in Western history. Enter Sam Brannan. Brannan was a merchant, a publisher, and a local leader in San Francisco. When he first heard whispers that James Marshall had found gold at Sutter's Mill, Brannan didn't go grab a pickaxe and a pen, he instead grabbed his ledger. Now, Brannan realized that this gold rush was useless if he didn't have the tools to dig. So over the course of a few weeks, he quietly traveled around Northern California and bought up every single shovel, pickaxe, and gold pan in existence. Every single one. He created an absolute monopoly on mining supplies. And once he had the inventory, he needed the customers. So Brannan filled a glass vial with gold dust, walked the streets of San Francisco, and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Gold, gold, gold," from the American River. Now, his psychological manipulation here really worked flawlessly. The town emptied out, people quit their jobs, but when they went to buy gear, there was only that one man selling it. Brannan was purchasing these pans for about 20 cents a piece and selling them to these desperate crowds for about $15, which is a 7,500 markup. Within a few years, Brannan became California's first ever millionaire, pulling in the modern equivalent of over $4 million a month. but he never had to mine a single ounce of gold. So Brandon proved and set out on this thesis that during a gold rush, you should be the one selling the shovels. Now take a young Bavarian immigrant named Levi Strauss. That name should sound familiar. He arrived in San Francisco with a load of heavy text canvas, hoping to sell it to miners for shelter. But he quickly noticed a bigger problem. The miners were doing this grueling physical labor on their hands and knees, and their standard cotton trousers were basically disintegrating in days. So Strauss partnered with a tailor named Jacob Davis. They took that heavy-duty canvas and later denim and used copper rivets to reinforce the stress points at the pockets. This was the first kind of durable work pants, and the blue jean was born. Today, everyone knows Levi Strauss, and they're generating over about $6 billion a year. Another example here is J.M. Studebaker. He arrived in California with just 50 cents in his pocket, but instead of mining, he used his skills as a blacksmith to build specialized wheelbarrows for the miners. So he saved these massive profits, moved back to the east, invested the capital into a wagon company that would eventually transition into manufacturing automobiles. But perhaps the most lucrative problem to solve was actually the gold itself. So these miners were living in lawless tent cities, and if you had a fortune, well, where did you put it, or who did you sell it to? How did you get back to your family in New York? Two men, Henry Wells and William Fargo, stepped in to solve the logistics of trust. They built heavily armored stagecoaches and a network of secure express banks. Now they charged a premium to weigh, store, and transport the miners' gold. While the prospectors slept with one eye open holding a shotgun, Wells Fargo built a financial institution that currently holds nearly $2 trillion in assets. By 1853, the easy game was over. The surface gold, also known as the placer gold you could just sift out of the stream with a pan, was nearly completely exhausted, and the myth of this kind of lone prospector had died. The gold that remained was trapped deep underground in quartz veins or buried under millions of tons of bedrock, and to access this, you needed massive capital. You needed heavy machinery, stamp mills, and a large workforce. Now this triggered what is the final phase of the gold rush, the corporate takeover. So wealthy syndicates formed these massive mining companies. As the independent miners were completely broke, they didn't have the tools to reach these other sources of gold, and they had no choice but now to go work for these corporations as daily wage laborers. So the men who came to California once to be their own bosses, many of them ended up working in dark, dangerous tunnels for now a fraction of the profits. These corporations also introduced something known as hydraulic mining. So building massive water cannons called monitors and basically blasting entire mountainsides away to get to the gold that's inside. It's devastatingly efficient for their balance sheets and apocalyptic for the environment. It choked many of California's rivers with debris, flooded farmlands, destroyed indigenous habitats, and left environmental scars that actually you can still see from space today. Let's think about the massive crypto boom of the last decade. So who's here making the most consistent, reliable money? For the most part, it wasn't the people trying to day trade these super volatile coins from their bedrooms, right? It was the cryptocurrency exchanges who are now charging all these transaction fees on every trade. And beyond that, it's companies like NVIDIA, right, selling the GPUs, kind of the equivalent to pickaxes that are required to mine the currency. In finance, there's a name for this called the picks and shovel strategy. It's an investment strategy that targets the underlying technology or tools needed to produce a good rather than the final good or outcome itself. It relies on an absolute certainty that while the prospectors take all the risk, the suppliers are the ones taking home all the profit. The 300,000 people who rushed to California built the foundation of the modern American West. They built roads, towns, and ports. But the story here is that the greatest lie of the gold rush was that really the gold was in the ground. In the eyes of some savvy business people, the real gold was the prospectors themselves. So this lesson will continue to be applied in the future. Possibly through AI, you can think of it as a lens of, the shovel suppliers being the ones having the data centers and building out that infrastructure. So use this lesson in the future and always consider if you're the one finding the gold or if you should be the one selling the shovel.